While brainstorming many ideas for theories on the Zelda timeline, I realized something that has now turned into this video. I have a couple of issues with the lore and structure of Wind Waker and its prologue, as well as the adult timeline overall. And these issues mainly come down to large holes that need to be filled with more lore, whether that be revealed in future games or within a special book like Creating a Champion or Hyrule Historia. As a diehard Zelda fan, I like having answers to the timeline, and Nintendo being Nintendo won't really give answers. So today, I'll present my conflicts, or rather, unsolved mysteries, and then present theoretical solutions on these matters afterwards. Feel free to comment on my opinions and give your own as we dive into the adult timeline, housing Wind Waker, Phantom Hourglass, and Spirit Tracks. My first issue, that while it does make sense, comes from an idea that needs to be further expanded upon, or allows some creative liberty to make it more interesting for a future Zelda release. This idea comes from the Wind Waker. As a matter of fact, it literally comes from the first few minutes of the game. When starting Wind Waker, we are given a prologue of some sort, giving us information on what happened many years before the game. As a sequel to Ocarina of Time in a different timeline, the prologue goes over the climax and ending of Ocarina of Time and what happened shortly after. Of course, Link returning to the past is omitted from this history since it happened in another timeline. Yeah, I know we all know this. Apparently, adult Link, the fully awakened hero of time with the fully awakened sages, finally gave Ganon a solid beatdown. In Link's final blows, Zelda weakened Ganon some more, and then she and the sages sealed Ganon away in the Sacred Realm. Now, according to Wind Waker's prologue, Ganon emerges from the earth and escapes the seal rather quickly, just several generations after Ocarina of Time. Since the Hero of Time was sent to another time period, the Triforce of Courage in this era was shattered into several pieces and spread throughout the land. And this somehow caused an error in the goddess's rules, and a hero could not be born to eventually fight evil. And since a hero wasn't born, the people pleaded to the gods over and over again, and then Hyrule was flooded to delay Ganon's power and his followers. This leads into the events of the Wind Waker. So my issue with all of this comes from that error that I mentioned, that a hero could not be born to fight a great evil even though it actually must happen, because it's an established cycle through the goddesses as well as Demise's curse. So what gives? Why is this an exception? The Triforce of Courage traveling back in time with Link caused some sort of reaction. It's as if the Triforce of Courage must always exist, but since it left the world by traveling to another time period, it caused that Triforce to shatter, meaning that another hero couldn't be born holding it like how Link did in Twilight Princess. Remember, this does make sense, and I'm not mad, I'm just not satisfied. Why couldn't a hero get the pieces of that Triforce and bring it all together before Hyrule was flooded? Why did it take hundreds of more years for Wind Waker Link to be born and then he would do it? Well, there was a fake rumor back in the day before Skyward Sword got announced that the next big Zelda game would be called Valley of the Flood. And it would be about what happened in between Ocarina of Time and Wind Waker, a prequel of some sort. It was theorized that the hero we would play as would actually fail and turn out not to be the true successor of the Hero of Time. But would he die or get exiled or become forgotten? That conversation became something very amusing. Nonetheless, Skyward Sword would be announced in 2010, and Valley of the Flood became a made-up rumor and not a real Zelda game. How sad, really. A game on why a hero could not arise when one should have according to the game's universe rules and lore would have been something unique and extraordinary. The protagonist might have been some other guy than Link, maybe with a different design, or maybe Zelda tried to do something. Who knows? Now guys, even if the Hero of Time stayed in the adult timeline, he would have likely been very old or dead by the time Ganon emerges in the Wind Waker prologue. So yeah, my issue is that there exists a whole story of Ganon returning to a world to cause destruction, and nothing has been playable or expanded on for that event in the Zelda timeline. But of course, disappointment entices creativity. I do have a theory that could solve this predicament, but first let's quickly go over my second issue, and if you want to see my theory on this first matter immediately, then please check the timestamps below. I'll go over this second issue rather quickly. It is actually more of a theoretical issue than it is an established lore mystery. So there's something called the Dragon Break Zelda timeline theory, in which all three timeline splits merge together to create the Breath of the Wild timeline, and Nintendo has actually given slight evidence within interviews to solidify this possibility even more. And if it is true, then that means the adult timeline must lead into historical events of other split timelines and then Breath of the Wild, or at least just lead into the era of Breath of the Wild. There is an issue with this theory, and I'll have to solve it with another theory. If the Master Sword rests in Ganondorf's head at the bottom of the sea, as well as the Triforce maybe also being there, it has to be brought back and become relevant within the adult timeline after Spirit Tracks. Ganon's spirit also has to come back as well, so that can't stay at the bottom of the ocean either. Remember, we have to go from Spirit Tracks to Breath of the Wild, so Ganon, the Master Sword, and the Triforce need to return somehow, which means all of these have to be reclaimed from the bottom of the ocean. I believe then that there exists a story or an eventual future game where Link must travel underwater and remove the Master Sword from Ganondorf's stone body, and this releases Ganon's spirit back into the world. Though with the Master Sword, the spirit can be sealed or defeated. What would a game like this be like? Well, stay seated and locked in because it's time for theorizing solutions. So, for my first theoretical solution, let's hop back on the idea of why there wasn't a hero born to fight Ganon during his emergence in between the events of Ocarina of Time and Wind Waker. Initially, a game like that fake Valley of the Flood could fill this void, but at the time of this recording and this video's release, another Zelda game on the horizon that exists could actually make sense to fill in this gap. I'm referring to Zelda: Echoes of Wisdom. Now, you guys are going to have to hear me out. I see the comments being like, dude, WTF is your problem? This is clearly related to Link to the Past and the Downfall timeline. You're an idiot if you think it could go before Wind Waker. Well, the Zelda timeline isn't consistent with its geography, character designs, and in-game recorded history. Thus, this can be feasible, and by the way, I actually have evidence and unique ideas, so listen up. First of all, even though I first argued Echoes of Wisdom to be around the beginning of the Downfall timeline in my last video, there is something that carries over to this new argument of Echoes of Wisdom maybe being before Wind Waker. And that's the Ocarina of Time parallels and very similar designs within Echoes of Wisdom. I'm talking about how Zelda looks and how she's trapped in the crystal, the business scrubs, the Gerudo, and the Great Deku Tree. I go more in detail with those in my previous video, links all around and in the ending cards. Anyway, it could be very much possible that Echoes of Wisdom is closely associated with Ocarina of Time's time period, and what do we know happens in Echoes of Wisdom? Link vanishes. Now, I know Link was just confirmed to be playable in Echoes of Wisdom, but that actually still doesn't disprove this theory. Link could be in this void world for a lot longer than we think, and that allows a certain Zelda concept to come into play, which is preventing reincarnation or being reborn because the spirit and/or body of a specific person is not dead, but sealed. We saw this in Tears of the Kingdom, with only spectral forms of Ganondorf, Calamity Ganon, being released in Hyrule, but not another Ganondorf or specific version of Ganon. The Calamity, its malice, and gloom all originate from Ganondorf sealed underground throughout the Breath of the Wild Tears of the Kingdom era. Now remember, anytime Ganondorf rises, a hero should be born and later equipped to fight him, and in Wind Waker's prologue, that doesn't happen and the gods intervene. And that doesn't really happen in the Legend of Zelda series. The goddesses created the Triforce and then left the world, as we know from Ocarina of Time's story on creation. So did some sort of powerful being call the gods back? A being from the Triforce, forcing the gods to come back? Triforce, forcing the gods? Triforce, could it be Tri? There must always be a hero born, remember that, unless something very unique happened. The wording used in the Echoes of Wisdom trailer is that Link vanishes. Did he truly vanish? What if there's another full game planned with this version of Link? Now you guys might be thinking that this idea is just too crazy. But look, what if time passes by differently in this void world? Or what if Link is sealed for such a long time in this void world that he is released way later down the road? Maybe he finds an escape that takes him to a different realm or another dimension. Remember what I said, if a special character's spirit and body is sealed, they can't be reincarnated. This Link in Echoes of Wisdom doesn't even have the Master Sword, so it makes sense for another hero to get it later. It's possible that Link is registered in the universe rules as a hero existing in this time period to fight evil, but can't fight evil because he vanished. But since he isn't dead, there's no reason for another hero to be born. So since this era exists, the gods have to intervene to solve things. That way a new hero could rise later when Ganondorf awakens from the ocean, which would be the events of Wind Waker. But then when would Echoes of Wisdom Link come back? Like I said, he could be released in some sort of alternate outcome, in a new timeline, or after the events of the flood, but still before Wind Waker, so that this Link can grow old and die, leading into the hero from Wind Waker to be the hero of Time Reborn, the one people have always waited for. Look, even though Link beat Ganon somewhat in Echoes of Wisdom, these void rifts and cracks appear throughout the land afterwards. Even if Zelda saves the day, could Ganon and Link appear later? These dark rifts could also point to these earth cracks in Wind Waker's prologue. Also, why do we see Ganondorf sealed at the end of Ocarina of Time as his, Gerudo human self, but then we see Ganon in Wind Waker's prologue emerging from the seal, from the earth, but then we see Ganondorf as a man again in Wind Waker's actual events. So that's intriguing and needs some explaining. What if Zelda had something to do with this? Maybe Zelda and Tri's effect on defeating Ganon causes a different reaction. Speaking of Zelda, Tetra from the Wind Waker is an independent adventurer. Perhaps her great-great-great-great-grandmother was a Zelda that went on her own adventure. There's some evidence, guys, I'm telling ya. Now let's go over some points arguing against this. First, the Great Deku Tree. Yeah, he died in the events of Ocarina of Time, but we have the Great Deku Sprout, who will grow into a new Deku Tree. Oh, but the Deku Tree Sprout is supposed to be the Deku Tree from the Wind Waker, and he doesn't have a mustache, but he has a double chin instead. Well, hold on. For one, maybe the flood made his mustache fall off, and two, a more realistic one, again, when are character designs consistent? Look at Link from A Link Between Worlds and Link from Triforce Heroes. Apparently, according to Hyrule Encyclopedia, they're canonically the same Link. So these Deku trees have a chance at being the same as well. Second arguing point, the Master Sword. Well, the Echoes of Wisdom Link doesn't have the Master Sword, so maybe he wasn't worthy to wield it yet? Now that's an idea, especially if we'll get a game in the future on what happens to this version of Link after Echoes of Wisdom. Now, to transition into solving my second issue with the adult timeline, what if Link from Echoes of Wisdom has a future game where he finds his way out of the Void World and does some sort of time travel shenanigans that helps him remove the sword from Ganondorf's head after the events of the Wind Waker? And no, that doesn't contradict Wind Waker Link, because Link, starting from the flood before Wind Waker, would time travel to the future after Wind Waker. And that's, by the way, that's Echoes of Wisdom Link, that's time traveling from before Wind Waker to after Wind Waker. Before this gets any more absurd and confusing, let's really think about solving the second issue with the adult timeline, combining with the other timelines, and then leading into Breath of the Wild. The Master Sword in Ganon must be relevant once again. What if we get a game after the events of Spirit Tracks that plays like Wind Waker? Toon Link returns to a 3D adventure that takes inspiration from Breath of the Wild and combines elements from Spirit Tracks. That could be a very interesting Zelda game. So interesting that I might have to give that idea its own video. But I'll say this, what if Link from Spirit Tracks, or a descendant of his, goes on an adventure to reclaim the Master Sword from the bottom of the ocean, but when taking it, he accidentally releases Ganon back into the world, similar to how Shadow Link convinced Link to pull the Force Sword to release Vaati in Four Swords Adventures. Man, hopefully we can get answers on these gaps within the adult timeline. I would really like to see Nintendo return to it one day. Anyway guys, what do you think? Are these theories too freaking crazy? I definitely went on a whim with these ones, but you know what? It was fun to make, and there is evidence at the end of the day. Be sure to check out my main, little more realistic theory on Echoes of Wisdom being in a new split timeline, as well as my other Zelda theories. I made a lot of theories on Tears of the Kingdom, so check out my channel for those. I'll also link to them in the description. Anyway guys, take care, God bless, peace out, I'm out.